Happy Pride, St. John. Bonsoir tout le monde. It is such a pleasure to be able to hold this event in Menahkwesk this evening. My name is Meredith Batt, and I'm involved with the Queer Heritage Initiative of New Brunswick. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the work of the Queer Heritage Initiative and the work that we do in conserving 2S LGBTQ+ history of New Brunswick is carried out on the unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. As an organization, we pay respect to the elders, we honor the knowledge keepers, and we seek their guidance as we strive to develop closer relationships with Indigenous peoples in this province. Tonight's BIPOC Queer New Brunswick Perspectives panel is QHINB's 5th annual intergenerational panel. And after the last one in 2021, it's really a pleasure to be back this evening. For those of you who haven't heard of QHINB, we're a grassroots archival initiative that was established in 2015-2016 by Dusty Green, and we work to collect and preserve archival documents, oral histories, ephemera, of 2S LGBTQ+ groups and individuals from around New Brunswick. We have a mandate to provide education sessions, and we do a variety of different events, including bringing together different generations of the queer and trans community together for a discussion like we're doing this evening. We are, to date, the only grassroots archives to partner with the provincial archives, and we're based out of Fredericton, and our collection is held at the Provincial Archives of New Brunswick. In the past 9 years, our collection has grown, and we now have over 21 sub-collections, which contain records and photos related to groups and individuals from across New Brunswick. This year's panel has been born out of our motivation to include the voices and records of the diverse members of the LGBTQ+ community. In the past, the stories of Black, Indigenous, peoples of color have been suppressed, ignored, or disregarded. Far too often, queer, BIPOC activists are not encouraged to take control of their material. They feel reluctant to donate their records, or their stories are not sought out by archival organizations. And this can lead younger generations and researchers to the dangerous conclusion that BIPOC people were not involved, when in truth, BIPOC activists in Atlantic Canada contributed greatly to these organizations while experiencing discrimination within and out of the queer community. This makes hearing the stories, like the ones you'll hear tonight from Hillary, Todd, Norman, and Victor, so important and essential to our understanding. I am so thrilled that we're able to partner with Blacklantic for this event. The work that Hillary LeBlanc and Clinton Davis have done to uplift the Black and POC voices of the East Coast is inspirational. And their podcast, yes, please. I think the podcast is in its 3rd year, right, Hillary?
Yes, 3rd year, 4th season.
Okay, awesome. So make sure to check it out on Spotify?
Spotify, Apple, YouTube, the internet.
The internet, right, okay, perfect, great. Is inspirational, and their podcast has profiled so many amazing and talented Atlantic Canadians. I'm proud to introduce you to the host of our panel, Hillary LeBlanc, but also to call her one of my very good friends. Hillary and I attended Université de Moncton together and reconnected over our shared love of history, but also wanting to tell overlooked stories of New Brunswickers who inspire us. So I'm really, really happy that she's here tonight. And it's my pleasure to introduce her, but before I do that, I'd actually like to invite Eric Savoie up to say a few words about St. John Pride, who also helped to sponsor this event.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much. I'm not going to take too much time because I'm so excited to hear everyone's story that's here, but really did want to thank Blacklantic and the Queer Heritage Initiative of New Brunswick for partnering with us to put on this event, because I couldn't agree more. It's so important that we have safe spaces to tell our stories and to learn from each other and learn from the past and to shape stories, our own stories, that can be told to future generations. So I'm Eric Savoie, I'm the vice chair of the board of Pride St. John, and we are so thrilled to be hosting the Pride Festival together with our partners in community, sponsors, and volunteers. And we've made really intentional efforts to integrate education into our Pride celebrations this year, and we hope to continue to do that because we think that's an important way to affect positive change in our community. So I'm really excited. This is actually our first official event of Pride, this Pride celebration. And our theme is really unapologetically proud. And so I hope that St. Johners and folks who are here to visit that might be here to visit really feel proud to be here and part of this week's celebrations with all of us. I'll just make one PR kind of pitch. We're doing our official flag racing at City Hall with the mayor and council and members of the community. And so for those of you who are around tomorrow, it's at 12 p.m. at City Hall here uptown, followed by cake and coffee at Java Moose on Prince William. And so I hope many of you will be able to join us there as well tomorrow. Great, so I'll hand this back over to Meredith. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I'd really like to thank Alex Saunders of St. John Pride as well for helping coordinate all of this. So Hillary LeBlanc, who I'll introduce now. Sorry, Hillary, I can't look at you. As an Acadian Senegalese woman, Hillary has spent her career working in communications in the nonprofit sector, helping to share stories of those in marginalized communities that she herself has experienced in. From this, Hillary founded Blacklantic, a podcast bringing East Coast voices to the world. As a journalist, she's written for Narcity, CBC, By Blacks, Addicted Magazine, and KM, and produced her own radio series and hosted several red carpets. From sustainability, philanthropy, or highlighting marginalized communities, her voice aims to be an extension for those who remain unheard. She sits on Fashion Group International, Toronto's board, and has co-created a Crybaby Art Gallery show and thrown a fashion show in the space earlier this year. She has also won the inaugural Canadian Women's Foundation Feminist Creator Prize and was named Digital Innovator at the Young Black Changemaker Awards by Black Business Professionals Network NB, and received distinction from the House of Commons, was nominated for Youth Entrepreneur of the Year by Black Business Initiatives, so very impressive resume. Next, I'd like to introduce Norman Hector, who's lovingly known as Normani in this city. And Norman is a leader known for his enthusiastic commitment for driving positive outcomes and drag performances. He is motivated by the mission of awareness, respect, and progression. With a strong background in corporate sales and team building for over 30 years, he recognizes the importance of dedication, service, and excellence. He's the youngest of eight children, sorry. And his parents and family were game changers in the civil rights arena. And this path really led him to teach, develop, inspire, and mentor our youth by embracing their challenges with his self-confidence and self-esteem classes for over 16 plus years. In 2016, he was awarded the prestigious Inukshuk Award for Community Impact Involvement and Leadership. And he's presented on diversity, inclusion, and equity with the top companies, including Black Lives Matter, Moosehead Breweries, and the St. John Welcome Center. Norman's also met with hockey coaches in New Brunswick in 2020 by presenting and delivering the value of his listen to learn and not listen to react message, and has spent time with our Memorial Cup winning team, the Sea Dogs, and is the very first drag entertainer to perform on TSN during a hockey game championship, which is really important. That's very cool. His mandate to change mindsets with his everyone belongs and feels valued attitude has been so important. Norman has been with his husband for over 30 years, married for over 16, and Norman brings unique perspectives gained from life experience, hard work, and determination. He continues to take his career awareness workshops and drag performances to unprecedented levels, and Norman's fearless, down-to-earth humor compels all to laugh while they learn. Next, I'd like to introduce Todd Ross, who's sitting next to Norman. He's a two-spirited Métis veteran raised in St. Stephen. Todd has been involved in fighting for 2S LGBTQ rights for over 30 years, and he has worked as an advisor to Ontario's first openly gay cabinet minister and to the first Two-Spirit president of a Métis nation. He is currently the Senior Indigenous Advisor at the University of New Brunswick, St. John campus, and is pursuing a postgraduate degree in interdisciplinary studies, focusing on the theme of self-determination among Indigenous communities in St. John. Todd was one of the lead plaintiffs in the Ross, Roy, and Stadelijk action class lawsuits, and that was involved in its role in systematically targeting and persecuting 2S LGBTQ individuals in the federal service. And this settlement by Canada is the largest LGBT human rights class action in the world. He's also one of the founding members of the Rainbow Railroad, a nonprofit dedicated to helping LGBT individuals escape violence, persecution, and discrimination in their home countries. He is currently the director or the president of Charlotte County Pride, and he currently lends his expertise as the co-chair of Rainbow Veterans of Canada, something that I know he'll talk more about tonight, and as director of the LGBT Purge Fund. Todd is the recipient of the Canadian Pride Citation and the Platinum Jubilee Medal from New Brunswick, and he lives in St. Andrews, New Brunswick with his partner Kirk. And last but not least, we have Victor Escobedo. Victor recently made Canada his home alongside his husband. His relocation to Canada was not just a geographical shift, but a pivotal moment for him to actively collaborate in advocating for the rights of the 2S LGBTQ community, a cause that resonates deeply with his values. His professional journey is marked by his broad expertise and internal control and risk management in the financial sector for almost 15 years. He's had different managerial roles, including in Mexico's 2 LGBTQ nightlife scene, and showcasing his commitment to creating a safe and inclusive space for our community. Now embarking on a new adventure in the nonprofit sector, Victor is eager to bring his enthusiasm and skills toward contributing to our cause. Beyond his professional achievements, Victor is an enthusiastic life lover who profoundly believes in equal rights for all. A dreamer with ambition, he envisions a world where everyone can live authentically without fear for discrimination, regardless of their background. With an unwavering passion for life, Victor is an avid foodie and cooking enthusiast, and also finds joy in the simplicity of nature, animals, companionship, and beauty of engaging conversations. Thanks for joining us tonight, Victor. Victor is also involved with the River of Pride and is currently the treasurer, so we're very fortunate to have him with us tonight. So none of this would have been possible without St. John Pride, QHINB board members, the Haven Music Hall, so big thank you to Abby and Sid. And a very special thank you to Boy Toyin for taking on our videographer needs last minute, so thank you so much. I promise I'm going to get out of the way and hand things over to Hillary. I promise. I just want to close with a few words, because in preparation for this panel, I was thinking about BIPOC Atlantic Canadians who really paved the way. And actor, poet, and playwright Walter Borden, Order of Canada recipient 2006, really stood out. Borden, who was who isn't openly gay man remembered the time when he was also the only black stage actor at Neptune Theatre and the only black stage actor performing east of Montreal in the 1970s. His autobiographical play, Tightrope Time, Ain't Nothing More Than Some Itty Bitty Madness Between Twilight and Dawn, was one of the first plays in the history of Black Canadian literature to directly present themes of male homosexuality. During its release in 1986, he was interviewed by CBC, in which he said, "In spite of all the things that might come down on your head in a lifetime, the human spirit will always rise, like a phoenix." And I hope we take these words with us as we go tonight. So, Wolayan, merci, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Meredith. I hope everyone is doing well. So to start off, I just want to recontextualize that I'm coming from this perspective as a pansexual identifying woman who is mixed Senegalese and Acadian, but I grew up in Moncton. And I know, Victor, you're spending time in Moncton, but we've got a mix here. I haven't been to St. John, I think, in over a decade, so thank you so much for having me here. But I'm really excited to hear about all of these various perspectives, as well as like geographical perspectives, because I do think there is a slight difference in what's going on in Moncton now versus when I left 7 years ago versus what you've all experienced in St. John, what you experienced coming in. So I'm very excited. But to start off, I want to get a little bit of a lay of the land. So I will go through the line. Victor, if you could tell me a little bit about what your life in New Brunswick has been like so far. And of course, I guess give us a little backtrack into what was it like being queer in Mexico and how does that compare to Canada?
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I think I would like to start saying that I really appreciate how the people from New Brunswick and Moncton has welcomed me and my family. So I'm really grateful. It's been an amazing journey from the moment when we moved from Mexico to Moncton to New Brunswick. That part is amazing. The community is amazing. They have been arms wide open to our family. I think in these couple months, like these past 6 months of this year, I have seen the community grow in a substantial manner. When I arrived in 2022, you barely see people around from the community gather around or gathering together, and that was kind of sad. At the beginning, I was like kind of depressed, like, oh my God, where's the community? Where can I join people, like queer people? Where can I gather around and share and express myself, right? Because there's no spaces in Moncton till recently, like maybe 2 or 3 days ago that they just opened a new venue. But it's been, at the beginning it was hard. I find part of the community still with some stigmas around gender expression, gender identity, and that was hard to see sometimes. So that's pretty much what I can say about my life in New Brunswick. Back in Mexico, well, I was living in Mexico City. It's a really, really big city. You get to see a lot of community around, but yet a lot of discrimination and a lot of hate crimes happening in Mexico. And one of the reasons that I decided to move here it was because I felt that Canada, it is a safer place towards towards LGBTQIA+ community.
Thank you. Todd, what about yourself? I know that you grew up in St. Stephen and then you left and you returned to New Brunswick. So how has that experience been for you in your queer identity and self-expression?
Sure, yeah. First, amazing to see such a great crowd here tonight. Congratulations to everybody for coming out, and to St. John Pride for hosting and for all the partnerships. So I grew up in St. Stephen. I graduated in 1987, so that was a little while ago. And when I was going through school, I knew I was gay and just really fought it. I had so much internalized homophobia growing up, which, you know, and particularly in the time, I think it was quite common that there were no positive role models out there. We didn't have Normani performing, and we didn't have these types of events. So I left New Brunswick as soon as I could. So when I graduated, I had been excelling in Army cadets when I was going through school. So I joined the military, and the first option was to join the Navy. And so I headed off to BC. That didn't work out so well, as you heard in my bio. Went through an investigation, kicked out, and then eventually sued the government and won. Short version.
We'll get into it in a bit, yeah.
But then living in Toronto, and part of that experience was some lessons for myself that I needed to be in safe spaces, that I needed to find places to work even that were going to be safe. And still have this fear from that time when I was, you know, in my early 20s of being fired for being gay. So still have that fear of this employment thing where, you know, if I get an email from a boss saying, I need to see you at 3 o'clock, my first instinct is, here we go. You know, that fire, that instinct comes back. So found places where I would be safe. You know, I mentioned worked for the first openly gay cabinet minister. Before that, I worked in retail for 6 years at a very open company, and was able to sort of live my authentic self. Also had the opportunity in Ontario to get more involved with the Métis community, which wasn't an opportunity when I was here in New Brunswick. So in Toronto, I was able to get involved and be able to be very openly gay within that community as well, and the acceptance through that. My partner, who's also Métis and from Saskatchewan, we decided we would buy a place in New Brunswick to come in the summers. He's a retired teacher now, but he had the summers off. So we came to Campobello, and we never really hesitated about it, although it's a very small community. And to be two openly gay people sort of spending our summers there, you know, just never thought it would be an issue, and it wasn't. Mind you, I'm sure if you dig down a little bit, being a young person on Campobello is probably not very easy, but we were able to live quite comfortably there. When we made the decision 6 years ago to move back to New Brunswick, though, sort of the realization that, one, it's remote, it's a little bit small, the healthcare is not as great because you're on an island, and we made the decision to move to St. Andrews, which again is a very safe space. There's a big community there. I was hesitant to go back to St. Stephen, which is where I'm from, but felt that St. Andrews was very welcoming, and again found a job here that was very open. So started working at the university as the Indigenous advisor here in St. John, and again, never an issue about being out. I know that there's challenges again for people, particularly, you know, I've gotten to the stage in my life where it's, I think because of my experiences and my age, it's easier for me. But you know, again, finding this place within New Brunswick now that is safe and accepting, and no concerns at all.
Thank you. Norman, continuing with this question as well, but I know that I've had the privilege of interviewing you in the past, and so I'm excited to hear a little bit about, obviously, again, like that intersectionality of growing up in St. John, growing up Black several years ago during the time of being raised here, what it was like being queer in school, because I can still remember your story because it was so powerful to me at the time. So if you'd like to share.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to sit on this couch with fellow panelists and this wonderful crowd. I have to say, first and foremost, it's really nice being back in here. I'm going to date myself. This used to be the Ideal store, this used to be the Ideal store, and coming from a big family, my mom would come here with us as kids, and buy our clothes before we went to school. So it's so nice to be back in here. And it just brought back so many memories as I walked through the door, because we would come here. And the Ideal store was a store that would allow people that came from low-income families to do huge layaways. Oh, wow. Remember the days of layaways? And they would allow low-income families to come in and lay away and put a little money on it every week. And I just am so happy to be back in this location. So I've been born and brought up in St. John. I've lived here my whole entire life. Come from a big family. I have wonderful parents, and I never went through a point or a part of not being comfortable. However, that was my mom and dad, until, of course, I realized that I was gay. Now, of course, I always knew I was gay, but like with most people, you follow the line that you think you need to follow. So growing up here, I did what every person that is in the closet does. I got married and had children. And I knew it was wrong. I was 19 when I got married. And I knew that I shouldn't have, but I did it because I wanted to please everybody else. I didn't want to please myself. The long and short of it is we divorced, and I have 2 great daughters. One daughter from my wife, who I respect and still admire to this day, and another daughter from 2 lesbians who wanted to have a child. So I have another daughter, and I'm very proud to say that I was able to offer that to 2 girls. Yes. Yes. But growing up in the city has been good and bad, because when you are black and you come to terms with being gay and you choose a white man that you're going to spend your life with, the black community doesn't like that at all. So I will say that my mother, God rest her soul, is no longer with us, but she helped me through a lot with coming to terms with the negativity that my own community, who was black, was showing me, and my own family was showing me. Now, my husband never went through that. And why, I don't know. But in the black community, I was shunned. And to this day, because of what I do as far as being a drag performer and being very much out with who I am, there's still very much of the black community that's very much afraid of me. They don't know how to approach me. They don't know what to say. But I'm still trying to educate the black community on there should be no fear with who I am. I am who I am. And I'm still the same person. I'm just who I'm supposed to be. But growing up in the city has been, as I said, good and bad. St. John is a wonderful place to live. I have had wonderful opportunities, wonderful jobs, and I've had some big jobs, you know, and right now I'm working for Horizon Health, but I didn't get to Horizon Health easily. I had struggles getting to Horizon Health, and I was kind of pointed in that direction based on my last position that I had. Because my last position that I had within the city, after working for them for 20 years, I had to file a human rights discrimination case against them. And I'm sure Hillary will get into that, and we'll talk about that. But when you start living your true, authentic self, some people will like it and some people will not. And some people will hide behind their mask and say they do. And to your face, they will tell you that they are fully supportive of you. But beware. Beware, because there's many sheeps out there in wolves' clothing. Beware. But I'm happy to be still living in the city. I have been afforded many wonderful opportunities to be able to perform and do what I'm doing in the city. I never dreamed I'd be doing that. And as I say, every time I step on a stage, I look up at the sky and I say to my mom, how did I get here? Because I do believe that it is a miracle, because I've had many struggles. I've told myself many stories. I've told myself, because of the way I'm treated by the black community, that I don't belong, and I'm not worthy, and I'm not valuable. But today, I'm a strong MF, and I'm very proud of who I am. Very proud.
Thank you. So Todd, I'll throw it back to you. I'd like to, you've teased a little bit about the lawsuit that you had and that you won and how pivotal it was in changing so many things within the Canadian landscape. So I'm curious if you could talk through a little bit about what it was like first being Two-Spirited and Métis while in the Navy, and then also talk us through the Ross, Roy, and Satalik class action lawsuit and sort of the what happened with that.
Yeah, thank you. So first, growing up here, my mom came from Saskatchewan, and she's my Métis connection. Her mother was Métis, her father was Irish. But she always hid the fact from us. And so it wasn't until I remember going on a school trip in grade 10 to Saskatchewan and visiting my aunt and uncle and going to the school, and I met these cousins who were in the town, and my cousins lived at the First Nation. And I was like, well, how does that work? I'm not quite sure. But then we started this process of self-discovery for the family, and my grandmother never admitted that she was Métis. And I mean, her family's, both her mom and dad went back generations within the fur trade communities. But there was so much stigma growing up that it was easier for her to hide. So when I was in the Navy, I knew that I had Métis heritage, but had not experienced my heritage. That wasn't until later in life. The one thing I did notice, though, is that there was nothing about indigeneity within the military in the late 80s, early 90s, that there was no visibility whatsoever. What I also knew at that time is that I was gay and that I was hiding that, as I had mentioned. And about a year in, so I went in the Navy. That was kind of the first choice they gave me, and I was like, sure, sounds good. They've got cool uniforms. And my title was a Naval Combat Information Operator, which sounded like a really cool job. It was really boring. I watched the radars. But I thought that was going to be my life, that I was going to stay in the Navy and that would be it. When I was given the choice of East Coast or West Coast, I was like, I grew up on the East Coast. I want to go see the West Coast. So I was posted out in Esquimalt, BC, in Victoria. I was posted on the HMC of Saskatchewan. A year in, I came home for New Year's. It was my first Christmas where I didn't get to come home. Came home for New Year's, and when I went back to the ship, I had 3 individuals come up to me and say, the military police here were here to question about you, and I was also told not to tell you that they were here. All 3 of them were interviewed separately, and it was things about my loyalty to the country, if they knew if I had ever gone to Russia, things like that, or the USSR at the time. And then, so I knew something was happening, but I wasn't quite sure. Eventually they came and they got me and pulled me in and went through this series of questions, again, very security focused. And then I went through all of these questions and they said, okay, well, we know you're hiding something. So we want you to do a polygraph exam, which I agreed to. And then I was immediately like shaking. So like a lie detector test, like what? So when you go in, and it's not like the movies at all, you're hooked up to this machine, but all the questions are yes or no questions, so you can only answer yes or no. You cannot vary, you cannot explain. And one of the questions on the test was, are you gay? And they ran through it beforehand, before I was actually hooked up to the machine. So I knew the question was going to be on there, and I never knew when they were going to pull me back, because it's part of this police sort of, make you sweat type thing. When I did the first polygraph and they asked me the question, are you gay? I actually came up with a method that I thought would fool them, and it did. That whenever they asked me a question, I knew it was based on your emotional response. So whatever the question was, I would answer the opposite of what I was going to verbalize in my mind before I verbalized it. So if they asked me, did you grow up in St. Stephen, New Brunswick? I would say in my mind, no, and I would verbalize yes. It came back inconclusive. So when they asked me if I'm gay, I said in my mind yes and verbalized no. So it messed up their little needle thing. But what it did was it kind of pushed it down the road because they didn't give up. So what probably I could have ended in a few months ended up going on for a year and a half. And in total, it was 6 lie detector exams. They sent people back to New Brunswick to question the guy who ran the photo shop who worked next to where my mom worked in the bank. And you know, my former principal was interrogated, or not interrogated, he was questioned about me. So all of these things. So 1990, May, they tell me, okay, now that you've told us you're gay, we're either going to let you finish your career in the military for the next 6 months. You have to leave, though, after that. But we're going to probably take away your security clearance. So we're going to transfer you onto the shore. So you're going to leave the ship, and you'll spend the next 6 months probably working, sweeping the streets, in the kitchen, those types of jobs, but nothing to do with security. Or we'll give you an honorable discharge. So I jumped at that. Took the honorable discharge, came back. They sent my futon and everything else that I owned, which was about the extent of it, back to New Brunswick. And I came back here to my parents to tell them something. I didn't know what I was going to tell them, why I was back 6 months early. They're like, you love the military. Why are you back? So my official story was I was investigated for espionage. They found a photograph in my possession which had a radio frequency in the background that broke what I was supposed to do. I wasn't supposed to have that photo, and they were going to take away my security clearance, which is true. That was the eventual reason that they gave, was because I had this photograph that they were taking away my security clearance. So that became an easy excuse. Fast forward, I got out. When you're in the military, you're in the closet. When you get out of the military and you start to come out into the gay community, you don't really brag about the fact that you've been in the military. So when in a couple years later, I moved to Toronto and I worked at Church in Wellesley. I was, one of the few jobs that I was qualified for. I got a job as a waiter on Church Street. So I can give attitude if I need to. Yeah. I got a job on Church Street, but I didn't tell people that I was in the military. The only time I disclosed that was for Halloween one year, where I wore my uniform and I had the best tips ever. Yeah. So there's this double closet. And then I didn't really tell people about the fact that I'd been kicked out of the military too, because I was ashamed of that. Even though I was working for an openly gay cabinet minister, all of these pieces, I still felt that shame that there was something I had done within the military that I got kicked out. I did casually mention it, and my partner, who I was with back then too, used to love at dinner parties saying, tell people about the time you were kicked out for being gay. So for him, it was kind of, and we would make fun of it. But eventually, it was when Trudeau was elected in 2015 that he made a comment that he was going to expunge the record of, trying to remember the name, Clifford? Everett Clippert, yes. That he was going to expunge Everett Clippert's record, who was the last person imprisoned for being gay. In 1967, I think he was imprisoned. And part of the reason in 69 that Trudeau Sr. changed the law. But when Trudeau Jr. made that mention, there's a very smart lawyer in Toronto by the name of Douglas Elliott, or now he lives in Elliott Lake. But Douglas started working towards, if Trudeau's going to do this one piece, let's put together a list of things that he needs to do. And one of those things was an apology to former federal civil servants who were discriminated or harassed within the government. Some who were fired, like myself, some who were called in for questioning, and others just the constant harassment. So we did a press conference on Parliament Hill. It was the first time where I was asked to do something. Helen Kennedy from EGAL called me up because she was a little bit familiar with my story and asked me to do this press conference. I immediately said yes, hung up the phone and thought, what have I done? Now I have to call my parents and tell them the real reason why I was kicked out of the military, and I have to start telling some other people about it. Went to Parliament Hill, It was the toughest thing to do because for the first time I had to sit down and relive everything I had gone through for a year and a half, plus all the years beyond that. But made it through. There were some tears, very emotional, made it through the press conference. We were working with the Prime Minister's office on an apology, on other parts of this report, but they weren't pushing it. They were agreeing to things, but it wasn't really going very fast, and that's where we decided to do the class action lawsuit. So Martine Roy, who is one of the lead plaintiffs on the class, fierce fighter, she spoke to Douglas and said, can we take this to a class action? He said yes. She was in Quebec, and because of our legal system, we launched in Quebec, and on the same day, we launched my case in Ontario to sue the federal government. We merged those two cases, and we brought in Alida Satalik, who had launched a case in Halifax, and so the three of us merged our cases and went through. It was one of the fastest class actions to be resolved because at that point, the Government of Canada did have the direction to push it through. The Prime Minister also planned to make his public apology in Parliament. So there was a real push from the Prime Minister's office to get it settled. So that heavy foot was on the Department of Justice to negotiate, and they did. We didn't get everything that we wanted, but in the end, it was a $145 million settlement for individuals from the civil service from 1950s into the early 1990s, up until 1996, when the Human Rights Code changed. And of that, about 110 million, I believe, went to purge survivors, as we've since called ourselves. We have another 24 million that is going towards the LGBT Purge Fund, and then the lawyers got some, and the consultants got some, and so in the end, I got enough to buy a car. I didn't get enough to buy a house. So, but it was something to be in Parliament that day, where we had the apology from the Prime Minister, from a representative from the opposition party. It wasn't the leader. And then from the other three parties, including the Bloc and the Green and the NDP, all the parties stood up and did this apology. It was quite something. I was sitting in the gallery across from the Prime Minister, and at a moment, this woman came in, sort of, looking like somebody who works out a lot, with two kids. She was a security guard with the RCMP, and the two kids were Trudeau's children, who he pulled out of school so they would be there to witness the apology that day. So it was an amazing day. It was kind of a thing that I never expected it. When I was kicked out, I was like, that's it. I'm just going to close this book and move on. There were a few things I did, like I filed for Freedom of Information back in '94 and got some of my records heavily redacted. But it was one of those things that I knew there was a wrong. I didn't think I was going to be the person standing in front, but it ended up being that way. And I sort of got pulled in a few times. That was the second time, is when my lawyer called me to say, would you be the lead plaintiff for Ontario? And I immediately said yes and hung up the phone and said, what the hell have I done? But it's been an amazing journey. It's been an emotional journey. I've met such incredible people along the way. It was the first time many of us got together. So we had never met other queer veterans before, or met few of them. We didn't know there were so many of us out there. So it's built this community within as well. And I recognize that if it wasn't for people like Martine Roy and Alida Satalik, if it wasn't for people like Douglas Elliott, and then I look at all the people who came before, and this only happened because of all of those fights. And so I recognize that the work that we do, we really are standing on the shoulders of so many people who came before us and stood up and said, we're going to fight this.
Wow. I want to say that it's it's such an amazing story, but like that's not a story. That was a big part of your life that you lived, and I cannot imagine what it would have been like to go through all of that. And I'm like selfishly happy I did not hear it before, so all of my reactions were honest. I did not know any of that, and my jaw was on the ground the entire time. You're next. So speaking of standing on the shoulders of other people, Norman, you are currently the only Black drag queen in New Brunswick, which is sort of how we've spoken in the past. And I would love to hear a little bit about how you got into drag and what it's like being the only person representing the Black community, also being, you know, in drag, and the joy and burden that we've previously discussed that comes with.
So thank you, Hillary. Oh, that was incredible. I mean, we've known each other, and I've never known this much, and thank you for sharing that. So being a Black drag queen, wow, where do I begin? I could go in so many different directions with this. But let me tell you how I got started, because I think that's key. I have a very supportive husband, and I can tell you this. When you decide to perform as a drag performer or become a drag queen, you are judged in so many different ways. And I've had people come up to me and ask me, how does your husband deal with it? You know, how does he feel about you doing this out in public? And I have to say, and he's not here tonight, but there are people here that know my husband. He is one of the most supportive men that I could ever possibly have in my life, to be able to do this. So I got started because I felt that there was something more that I needed to do. Now I'm going to tell you how I got there. My husband has had 2 children. He has 1 child, a daughter now, and we went through a tragedy in our life, and it was a horrible tragedy. And we lost his son, and we were raising his son, and we lost him. He was hit by a car during a March break. And I remember sitting at the funeral home with my husband there beside me, thinking, there's got to be more that I can be doing, you know, to impact people. There's got to be more. There has to be. So then, of course, I talked to my mom, who was my rock. And I said, Mom, I'm thinking about performing in drag. And my mom knew a lot. And my mom said, so why do you want to do this? And I said, because I feel, Mom, that there's something more that I can be doing. I want to be doing more in the community, and if it's this, then I need to be doing it. And she said to me, be careful, because you will be targeted, you will be judged, and there's going to be people that are going to come for you. And all those things she said has happened. But I still went ahead and did it. So before I would start doing drag, I would go downstairs. My mom lived with my husband and I before she passed away. She lived with us for 10 years. And I would go downstairs and I would perform for her. Now, she was in a wheelchair. She lost her leg to diabetes, so she was in a wheelchair. So I would go downstairs and I would perform for her. And she loved it. So then I decided I'm going to take it out to the public. So I decided that I was going to do that. I never dreamed that I was going to get the kind of reception that I'm getting as a Black drag performer. Now, I can tell you I've done many shows, and I've looked out into the audience, and I see nothing but white faces. I see 0 Black faces. And I know why. And it makes me sad to think that my own community does not support me the way that I feel they should. I remember being in a grocery store, and a Black gentleman came over to me, who I know, who's quite well known in the city, and he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, you're running around town in these dresses, making a fool of yourself. Do you know what that is doing to the Black community? And I was stunned. To think that somebody would come over to me in a grocery store and say that. And I went and I said to my husband, I went home and I said, I just ran into so-and-so, and this is what he said to me. And my husband said, so you know what you need to do? Is you need to do more. You need to do more. And I did. So I started knocking down doors, calling people, and putting myself out there wherever I possibly could to make sure that people that felt uncomfortable with it were going to become comfortable. Because what I was doing, and what any drag performer does, there is zero harm in that. Zero harm. And I say that with strength because right now, the drag community is being so much, it's being beat up so much. For what? For misinformation, for lies, for things that are happening that aren't true. So when I step on a stage, I make sure that people leave knowing that drag is nothing to be feared. It is to be celebrated. I remember, and I think I knew things changed when I had a call from the Sea Dogs, and they asked me if I would perform. And I thought, well, clearly he must be asking me to perform as Normani, because I don't perform as Norman. Well, I do in other things. But as Normani? So I said to the coach, I said, are you sure? Yeah, we want you to perform as Normani at a hockey game. And I said, oh, I don't know, I got to think about that. Because this is St. John. I don't want to get chivied, or I don't want my house egged, or my windows busted out. I said, I got to think about this. I went home to my husband and I said, so this is what they're asking me to do. Should I do it? He said, why not? And I'm so happy I did because it led me to performing at the Memorial Cup for the CHL. And I never would have gotten that opportunity if I had backed away. If I had said and told myself a story, which I've done many times, don't do it, Norman. Don't do it. You don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be something bad that's going to happen. And I remember standing down in TD Station, dressed as Normani, and I had the brasses of CHL standing beside me. And I looked at them, and they're men with the silver hair and the pointy faces, and and I'm thinking, oh my God, Mom, how did I get here? How did I arrive here? And I remember walking out, and I thought, okay, this is it, Norman. There's 5,000 hockey fans that are here to see the Memorial Cup, and they're now here to see you. You're either going to do this well, or you're going to hide for the rest of your life. I remember walking out. And what kind of reception do you think I got?
Yeah.
Wonderful, warm reception from St. John hockey fans. Yeah, from St. John hockey fans. And I remember the CHL saying to me, do you want security? And I said, well, you better give me security just in case, because my husband's a scrapper. He's a fighter, all right? So I said, I don't want him getting into a fight and the cops being called and me having to be pulled out of here. So I said, yes, give me security. Didn't need security at all. As a matter of fact, I said to security, leave. I was walking around TD Station dressed as Normani after performing, and hockey fans coming over to me, wanting to get their pictures taken, wanting to ask why I do this, respectfully. And when I did that, I knew that I had brought Normani to a different level. And all the black people, because I can say, and I'm saying this as a black queer man, all the black people that looked down their nose at me and judged me, do you think that they treat me differently now because of that? Yep. Some do, some don't. Some will come up to me and say, we cannot believe you did that on TSN. And I say to them, I did and I do it again. But I love being Normani and I love being Norman. I mean, there's two different characters, but they both have helped me survive. They've helped me get through life. And I'll be Normani until I can't be Normani anymore. I mean, I think that when you can embrace a passion in something that you love, and you can put it out there in a way that people are being taught something about compassion, about understanding, about educating people, then you've got a gift, you've got something in your hand, and you don't want to let that go. And I don't believe that being the only black drag performer is a big deal, but I do know that it is because I've met other black drag performers from Ontario, from all over Canada, that have said to me, how do you do that in New Brunswick? Like, that is scary. That is scary that you are doing that. And you know what? I don't think about the fear of it. I just go out and I do it. And I hope that whoever has the chance to see me, they take something away from it. Because to me, it's about performing, but it's also making everybody that's sitting in those chairs feel good about themselves. Because that's what I want people to feel, good about themselves. And to know that if they have a thought in their mind, and if they have a dream that they want to pursue, nothing can stop them. I'm doing drag in St. John, New Brunswick. I did a hockey game. I still do hockey games. So nothing can stop you. And that's what I make sure people understand.
I'll ask you as well about the human rights case with Xerox, and then we can get all the legal stuff out of the way. Talk us through, I mean, for me, it's also hearing you advocate for yourself over and over again. All three of you continue to do this just by existing, but talk us through a little bit of that process, because I believe it's still ongoing.
Yeah, so I worked for Xerox for 20 years before I landed at Horizon Health, and it's a wonderful place to work, you know? But there are people in chairs that make decisions that aren't so great. And some things were done to me that were unfair. And some things were said to me that were unfair. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know which way I should go with it. So I had the discussions, or I thought I had the discussions, with the proper people within the corporation about how I was feeling about not being paid fairly. Because one day I was sitting at my desk, and I had the same first name as the HR manager had, her last name. So my name is Normand Hector. Her name was Martine Normand. And they were getting ready to do a big cut of staff at Xerox. And all of the pays of the people that were being cut, and all of the pays of people that weren't being cut, were all sent to this head of HR. Well, you know when you type in something in your email and you don't check who you're sending it to, but you should? They thought they were sending it to HR. They sent the pays to me. I opened it and I read it because I thought it was something that I should be reading. So I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, these are everybody's pays. So I looked again and I thought, well, I wonder what Todd's getting paid. He's doing the same job I'm doing. I wonder what Hillary's getting paid. Because I wanted to know. And I found out at that time that I was the lowest paid manager. The only black manager, but the lowest paid manager. And I started questioning, wait now, something's not right. They found out I had gotten the pays. They immediately came to my desk, made me sign an NDA. Do not talk about it. You didn't see it. Poke your eyes out. So I held that. So I went to my manager and I said to my manager, I'd like to discuss with you my pay. And she said, well, what do you want to discuss? I said, I don't believe I'm being paid fairly. She said, but you are. I said, no, I'm not. She said, you are being paid fairly. You're top of your grade. And I said, no, I'm not. She said, how do you know that? How do you know that? And I couldn't mention that. The NDA. I didn't mention anything like that. I said, I just know. I know that I'm not being paid fairly. She said, well, here's what I'll do. I'll go to HR and I'll see what I can do as far as getting you more money. And I said, well, why don't we do it together? Have a conversation together. Because I'd like to advocate for myself on why I feel I should be getting more money. She said, no, I'll do it. So I waited and waited, months and months and months. I would keep going back to her and asking her, what's the update on me, getting a pay raise? And I never went and said, I want X amount of dollars, I want, 50. I just said, I want a fair pay raise. I want a fair one. She kept delaying it, kept putting it off. So then, of course, I went to her and I said, are you even working on this? Are you even working to advocate for me? She said, yes, but I got to tell you, it's not looking good. And I said, well, what do you mean? And again, I'm the only black manager in there. And she said, your brand is being questioned. I said, my brand? She said, yeah, your brand. You came, seeking more money and it's damaging your brand. And I said, because I want to have a conversation about my pay, it's damaging my brand? She said, yeah, it's damaging your brand. And she said, I would probably put it on the back burner for now and not bring it up. I said, no, no, that's not going to happen. I said, I want to talk to HR. She said, well, I don't know if that's a good idea. I said, I'm demanding to talk to HR. Well, I'll see if I can arrange it, because you had to go through a process to get to people. Okay, you just didn't call them on the phone. I never ever spoke to HR, so I went to my CEO. She was in the same building. I knew her personally. So I went up to her and I said, I want to talk to you about something. And I said, I think I should be able to talk to you about this. And she said, sit down. And I said, I don't believe I'm being paid fairly. No, I'm not asking for 50 or 100 or, there is no amount. I just want to be paid fairly. And she said, well, how do you know you're not being paid fairly? I said, I know. And I said, you know if I'm saying it, I know that I'm not. She said, okay, well, let me see what I can do. She did the exact same thing as the other manager did, never got back to me. So I resigned. I resigned after 21 years. And I believe they were trying to force me out the door because nobody actioned anything. When I resigned, I played it smart. IT was a very good friend of mine, so I had them put all of my emails on a hard drive before I left. Not knowing what I was going to do at that time, I just thought, you know what, maybe someday I'm going to need this. So all of my emails, all of my communications, I had all of my communications on my cell phone, and I thought, you know what, Norman, you might need this someday. So I resigned, and I was sitting, I'll never forget it, I was sitting in my trailer in Capellet, New Brunswick, and I thought, I'm going to call a lawyer and see exactly where I stand with this. So I picked up the phone, and he would not mind me telling you who he is because he's one of the best lawyers that you could ever possibly want to use, Kelly Van Buskirk. He's the top employment lawyer in New Brunswick. I called him on the phone, and I said, Kelly, this is what's happened. I don't want to waste your time. Do I have a case? And he said, Norman, send me the email, send me all the documentation, and I'll let you know. He called me back maybe 2 days later, and he said, you absolutely do have a case. But what we're going to do, Norman, is we're going to present it to human rights first. Right. And that's what I did. Now, this is where it gets complicated. When I presented it to human rights, I had no idea of the timeline and the process and the pain and the agony that you go through. But I did it. It took 4 years of me waiting to get an answer back on whether or not Xerox was going to be held liable for not paying me fairly. And I'll never forget the day I got the email. I'll never forget it. Because they didn't call me on the phone. They sent an email to me saying, and I remember seeing the email coming in, and my case number, and Norman Hector against Xerox, and I was shaking because I thought, okay, this is it. Either they believe me or they don't. Because I think in my mind, because I questioned myself. Should I have done it? Should I not have done? Like, many things go through your mind when you are leaving a job because of unfair treatment. You question yourself. You second guess yourself. But I was shaking when I opened it, and I remember them saying, Xerox is going to be held liable. And that's all I saw. I didn't see anything else out of the 80 pages. I just saw Xerox is going to be held liable. So at that same time, my phone rings, and it's my lawyer, and I said to him, they believed me. They believed me. Somebody believed me when I said that I wasn't being paid fairly. So to make a long story short, Xerox is now being held liable for not paying me fairly. So now it's going before the Labor Board. And the Labor Board will make a decision now on what's going to happen as far as settlement goes. Kelly has that all lined up because there's many things I missed out on. I never thought about CPP. I never thought about all of the things. I never thought about damage just because I was discriminated against. I never thought about those things. Because in my mind, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about doing what was right. And I think the reason human rights took so long is because they wanted to make sure going up against a company the size of Xerox that they had all of their I's dotted and their T's crossed. Now, 4 years, I could have been dead and buried. But 4 years later, I did get an answer. And I'm happy that it is in my favor, I'm not happy that I had to do this because I've lost many friends. I've lost many people look at you differently when you challenge them. And they judge you differently when you challenge them. And the first thing that comes to people's mind is, he's doing this for money. It was never about money. Because I never once said to Xerox, I want $50,000 or $100,000. I just want to be paid fairly. That's it. And they never wanted to have a conversation about that. So now they have to. Sadly, they have to. And it came to them being pushed to have the conversation. Now, when Xerox is asked about it, because CBC, many news correspondents have asked them about it, they don't even want to talk about it. They just come out and say, we are an equitable company and we strive to treat everybody fairly and equally, period. Then why are you not talking to this person about this? Why are you not wanting to sit down and have a conversation? So now they're forced to have it. And I think my hearing, which you'll hear, because it'll be on the radio, and I'm sure it'll be splashed everywhere, will probably be coming up towards the middle of September. And the hearing is when I'm going to have to sit up in front of everybody and tell my story again. But I will tell it, and I will make sure that it's heard, because I believe that it's not even about me being this color. It's about everybody that is not being paid fairly or equally, or treated fairly or equally. It's not about me being black, because that could be a portion of it, but I want everybody to know that if you are a woman, if you are from a different country, if you are from a different culture, and you feel you're not being treated fairly, you have every right to speak up and be heard.
I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to condense some questions because I have some really spicy questions I want to get to at the end. So Victor, I would like to ask you a bit about the work that you're doing with River of Pride, and also to touch on a little bit of how the reality of Pride festivals have changed over the years, because I will get to a more general question for everyone, but I think Pride festivals have been having a harder time this year. I know that there's been a lot of, for lack of a better word, drama across the whole country with various prides and having backlashes and different issues. So I'm curious first about River of Pride and all the positive stuff, but then how has managing this been?
Thank you. Well, first of all, this is going to be impossible to beat. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, Norman and Todd. So working for River of Pride has been an amazing journey for me. This is my first experience working with non-profit organization, and in particular with the queer community. Before coming here to Canada, I was saying to myself, Victor, you should start involving a little bit more with the community. And as soon as I moved into Moncton, I started to make some researches of what could I do for my community. I saw that they had these spots open. I applied for the treasurer after a year of being here in Canada, and they voted me as their treasurer, right? So the whole board changed that this last December. So I think we have been doing a lot of good work in terms of trying to bring community together, to put some diversity into the events that we are doing this year on the festival. We have a couple different events for multicultural backgrounds, I'll say so. So for what I heard from the community, they feel comfortable with the job we're doing. They feel happy of what we are doing. So I'm glad to be a participant on those changes that we are making. Now, in terms of how things have been changed over the past years, I don't really have much to say there because I was not here. But what I can tell you is that backlash is always you're always gonna have backlash, whether you do one thing or the other, whether you do or you don't do. So, because it's impossible to have everyone happy, right? It's impossible to, you try to listen to the community, because that's what we try to do. We have to bring the community together and listen what they're expecting us to do. But it's hard to find that middle point, or meet us halfway, right? But I think the important part is where you listen to the community, you act, but you don't hear the movement itself. So that's I think the fine print, and I think we all, the Pride movements, are trying to do at this time, at these years, particularly because we have. We all know that there's like a particular subject, like very sensitive topic that everyone wants to talk about. So it's hard for the Pride movements to get involved sometimes. We all know that Pride is political, and we need to have a stand on that. But I mean, again, backlash. We always gonna have backlash.
Thank you. Todd, the list of charitable organizations you support is quite long. You do work with Rainbow Railroad, you do work with Rainbow Veterans of Canada, the LGBT Purge Fund, and you're also president of the Charlotte County Pride. I'd love for you to touch on those a little bit, but I know that you're also working to build Thunderhead, which is a monument funded by the LGBT plus Purge Fund in Ottawa. So I would love to hear about all of these wonderful things that you're championing.
Sure, thank you. I'll start with the last one you mentioned, which is incredibly exciting. Thunderhead is the national 2S LGBTQI plus monument that's being built in Ottawa. It should be launched next May, it'll be ready in May, or it's supposed to be ready in May. We're planning to launch it next Capital Pride in Ottawa, so August of 2025. Providing all the construction stuff works out.
Book your hotels.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the class action lawsuit, so it's part of that LGBT Purge Fund's settlement, where when we were doing the agreement, there's this weird thing, and I won't get too much into law, because I don't fully understand it, but there's this weird thing in class action lawsuits in Canada, particularly if it's a human rights based lawsuit, that if a person's died, their estate gets nothing. So the harm was done to the individual, so the estate cannot receive anything. So our lawyers, knowing this, because this happened with the George Hislop case on same-sex spousal benefits, they negotiated what became the LGBT Purge Fund. And we've kind of nicknamed it blood money, because it's the money for the people who were discriminated against by the government, who were kicked out, who were fired, who did not live to see it. Mental health was a huge piece in this. A lot of people committed suicide who were affected. So it's remembering those people. It's people who died of HIV, who were also part of the purge. It's people who died because this happened beginning in the 1950s. So it's a $24 million fund that was established from this, that's going towards the project in Ottawa, the Thunderhead Monument, which we made the decision that the Thunderhead Monument, you don't get to build monuments in the capital city of Canada very often. So we said we don't want it to be just about people who were fired from the military or discriminated against in the military. We want it to be for all 2S LGBTQI plus people. So it's a monument for our whole communities. So that monument's being built. There's other pieces. We're working with the Human Rights Museum in Winnipeg, where we're doing a major exhibit that's opening in February. I know everybody loves going to Winnipeg in February, but it'll be going for a year, so you can go next summer. There's a traveling exhibit that'll be coming here at some point, and I'll make sure it gets to St. John. There's also, we were able to get the records, so cabinet documents, letters from Michelle Douglas, who is an incredible individual, who stood up in 1990 when she was kicked out of the military and sued the government and got the policy changed for the military. There's letters that we were able to access through this class action of the Minister of National Defense writing to the Prime Minister, copying to the Attorney General saying, we don't have a case here. She's far too believable. She's too good of a person. If we take this to the court, we're going to lose. We have to settle with her. Those are the kinds of documents that we received, and they're available on the LGBT Purge website. We've published them. We've engaged this guy you may know of, Sven Robinson, who was the first openly gay member of parliament in Canada. Sven is pouring through those records, and he's a big geek, so he loves it. But pouring through these records, also a lawyer, which helps, and challenging the government when we find things that sometimes they make a mistake and they send two of the same document in different batches. In one of the documents, it's heavily redacted, in the other document, it's not. And he goes back to them and says, why was this redacted in this document? There's no need for it to be, and takes it to the judge and is challenged. So he's been a great advocate on it. So we're doing all these pieces. There's also a community grant piece that's opened now that is offering $25,000 to organizations, groups that are doing anything about the LGBT Purge Fund. That's open. You can check out our website if you feel like you want to apply for it. But the monument that's being built, it's called Thunderhead because it's a cylinder. We did an international competition, and the group that won is out of Winnipeg. And they're working with Elder Albert McLeod, who's an amazing Two-Spirit elder. And the idea behind Thunderhead is it's that, so there's indigeneity to it. The thunder cloud is a very important symbol in many Indigenous communities in Canada. So the Thunderhead monument is an inverted cloud on the inside of this cylinder. And because we wanted to queer it up a little bit, the inside of this cloud is going to look like a disco ball or a group of disco balls with mirrored tile. And then there'll be light shining on it, so you're going to get these prisms of light coming off. So this is the Thunderhead monument that's being built. It's just below the Library and Archives building in Ottawa. It was a huge process to get a piece of land, which we had to pay for through the blood money. But we did get a site. It's right on the Ottawa River, so it's it's a spiritual place as well, and it's a place of celebration. It's going to be an educational place with panels talking about our struggles as 2S LGBTQI plus Canadians throughout time on these panels. And of course, because you can't say everything on panels, there'll be links to websites talking about it. The cool thing that 3 weeks ago, I met with the Grand Chief Ron Tremblay of the Wolastoqiyik, invited some Two-Spirit people and some other people to come out. We went to Black Beach, and we selected a stone that was on the beach. This stone is going to go to Ottawa. It's currently sitting in my yard. It's very heavy, by the way. It's like 18 by 18 by 18. But this stone is going to Ottawa, and it'll be one of 13 stones around a sacred fire beside Thunderhead. That'll be a place to acknowledge Two-Spirit people and the struggles, to acknowledge that homophobia and transphobia is a colonial import. And it'll be a place of celebration within there. This stone, I'm also equally proud. It comes from Menahkwesk, which was very important for me. I was asked to choose the New Brunswick stone, and so I pulled in these other people, and Elder Grand Chief Ron Tremblay was able to help us. But it's a stone that, when you look at Reversing Falls, and there's the stories of Glooskap with the creation of the Wolastoqiyik, there's the gray sort of marble on the side of Reversing Falls, and we picked it from the UNESCO site. That marble is the stone we chose that we found on the beach at Black Beach. And the amazing thing is, when we were choosing the stone, we had a few that we were looking at. The tide was coming in, and the tide kissed the stone. So that stone was picked by the Bay of Fundy. And it's representative because Menahkwesk is a place, it's a gathering place. This is a place where Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, and Pekotomuhkati people met. We didn't have borders. And it was a place where people came together in trade and celebration. So it was important to be representative for New Brunswick, that it come from a place that had the tie-in of the Indigenous communities, as well as the contemporary urban Indigenous community that's here now. Just quickly, a couple other things. So that's the LGBT Purge Fund. Rainbow Railroad was something I was involved with to get it started. I was one of the founding members. I had gone to World Pride with a few other people, and we had the opportunity to meet a young person who had been left for dead by their family because the family found out they were gay. And it was this recognition that there are queer people around the world who, just because of where they are and just because of whatever crap is happening in that place, they're at risk. So we started an organization. We started it very slow on purpose because we were dealing with people's lives, where we would help people in countries where they were not safe to get to countries where they would be safer. And it involves getting people flights in the early days. So I would actually get emails from people from around the world in various places requesting assistance, and we were scrambling dollars together. To their benefit, TD Bank came forward and gave us $200,000. It was our first big donation, and with that, we were able to sort of amp up. If you look at Rainbow Railroad today, and I'm not involved, I'm a past board member of it, they're doing such incredible things. They're involved with places around the world helping queer people find safe places to get to. I'm so incredibly proud of that organization and what they've become through efforts of so many people. And then Charlotte County Pride. My prom date from high school reached out to me and said, she's a lesbian. Didn't know that then. I wasn't gay back then either. But she reached out and said, we need help. Can you help out? So I've been involved with Charlotte County Pride. We've had pride marches in St. Stephen, in St. George. We had our second one this year in St. Andrews, mostly for convenience. But it's so important just that we have that visible presence. And Normani was there last year, so thank you, Normand, that you were there, and it was such an incredible image to see Normani on the back of a convertible with a very large pride train, being supported by some older women, some elder women who were part of the United Church in St. Andrews who were holding your train, and to see them marching along. So that's the community building. And with some money we raised through that, through our little barbecue supported by NBCC who volunteered to do it, we were able to send kids here to the Pi conference. So we were able to send a gay kid from Grand Manan who didn't have full support, and some other students from that GSA to come here in St. John and celebrate who they are and to be in a welcoming environment. And I'll cut it off there because I've talked too long.
It's amazing.
So, Norman, in the quickest way possible, can you talk about being on the 2S LGBTQ board member for Horizon Health, but also the DEI leader for Hockey New Brunswick? Because those are both very, very cool.
Yeah, I can. I always like to start that off with, people always say that, I mean, they'll question why things are happening in your life. Like sometimes you'll say, oh, why did this happen? I feel so bad for myself, or, and you never ever think these things are happening for a reason, And in my case, a lot of these things happen for a reason. So when I filed my case and I hired that lawyer heard me and wanted to get me to do more with him with Hockey New Brunswick, because he is the lawyer for Hockey New Brunswick. So he said, I've got to get you in front of the coaches for all of New Brunswick. They need to hear from you. And I said, are you sure? He said, yep. So I met with the coaches, and the coaches then went to Hockey New Brunswick and said, we need to get this guy. We need to get Norman to be our DEI lead, to go around and talk to the hockey players, to go around and talk to the coaches, to go around and talk to, the families about educating them on homophobia.
Or maybe the Premier of New Brunswick.
That's funny, that's next.
That's in the works.
Yeah, that's in the works. So as I was doing that and out there speaking, because I've been all over New Brunswick, I have been in every arena talking about making sure that we are heard and we are valued as a queer community. And it's wonderful because the hockey players will sometimes be very much not on board, but I get them on board. I get them on board because what I am saying to them, they need to hear. So as I'm doing that and I'm talking and being interviewed on the radio, there's a doctor that's listening to me, unbeknownst to me. So when I say things happen to you, they may not happen at the time because they're not supposed to happen to you at that time. So there's a doctor listening to me, and the doctor calls me and says, I'd like to talk to you about coming to work for me at Horizon Health. And I said, no, I'm not working at the hospital. That's not my gig. No, I'm not doing that. And he said, at least come and talk to me. At least come and talk to me. He said, you have nothing to lose by coming and talk to me. And I said, all right, I'll come and talk to you. But I can tell you right now, I am not working at the regional hospital. I'm not doing that. He said, well, at least come and talk to me. I went and talked to him. He, of course, convinced me. And I am now working for the top doctor that takes care of our trans patients. Oh, wow. Yes. So when I say there's a complete circle that goes around, it's amazing because I am now doing exactly what I should be doing based on all of that ugliness that happened to me at Xerox. So when things happen to you, and I say this to everybody in this room, when things happen to you and you question why they're happening, know that there's something bigger and better waiting for you. I'm proof. I'm living proof. And it's just so lovely. And about a month ago, we had Pride Day at the regional hospital. And it was their first Pride Day. And they asked me to come in and perform as Nirmani. And it was incredible, the love that people showed. And after that, they asked me to step into a role as the chairman of the 2 LGBTQ plus board. So now I'm in charge of that. But the best part about this is walking into my office and knowing that if you are transgendered, you're going to get me. And you're going to feel comfortable. And you're not going to be made to feel like you don't belong and that you're not valued and that you're not loved. And that's the best part about my job.
Thank you. So I've left the two spicier questions for last, and I will combine them, and then we will allow for some quick Q&A. But I feel, considering the current political climate, government changes to policies such as Policy 713, and the amount of hate speech that's been going on and impacting various prides, I'd like to know how you're all participating in your queerness in 2024 and what that's like, but also how that is impacted, or how your queerness is impacted by the fact that you have these multiple intersectionalities and that you are BIPOC, and if you find it harder to find community as BIPOC queer people. So both, how are you queer in 2024, and how have you been able to find community considering the state of the world on fire outside? Victor, if you'd like to start.
Yes. In regards to like what we have seen in terms of like the hate speech that we have heard in the past probably year, it's, I don't know, I find that really sad how these public figures of power come with these words, because I think that empowers, or that validates the hate speech of everyone else's and make us a target. About Policy 713, I just do this comparison. It feels like when you hear of Russia persecuting queer community, it feels kind of the same. So it's sad to feel this way in this beautiful country, because again, one of the reasons that I moved here is was thinking that I was gonna be safe here, and sometimes in these particular cases feels like we are struggling a little bit again. Yeah. We are taking a step back. So it's just matter, and I know the community is strong enough, it's fierce enough, and it's powerful enough that it's gonna fight back against this, and we're gonna win, as always have done. Yeah. And how am I navigating queerness in 2024? Probably my first thought is with fear. But not really, because again, community is power, community is together. I think that we need to be close more than ever to fight about this.
Thank you. Todd?
So one of the things we did at Charlotte County Pride was last year our conservative MLA showed up, who was one of the people. She became a cabinet minister because she supported the premier, and there was nobody else left to make cabinet ministers. And there were people very angry that she showed up at our Pride event. And so we had a lot of calls for people saying, you can't allow her to come. And it's tough because, one, I'm not going to be, I'm not the guy who can go physically remove somebody. Maybe we get your husband. But what we ended up doing, though, was recognizing there was an issue. We actually sent out a letter to each of the political parties and said, we need you to commit to reversing the changes that happened on Policy 713. We need you to commit to being a supporter of our community. And if you're not willing to do this publicly, you're not welcome to come to our Pride. She didn't respond, and she didn't come. Every other political party came, though, and they all signed that commitment. And so we have that, and we'll be publishing that for the election, that these are the commitments that we received. These are the political parties that are supporting. And we received nothing from our minister. So that's one of the things. It's also tough. So coming from that, from a two-spirit perspective, there's so few indigiqueer people around, but there's also there's actually a lot here at the university that I get to work with, a lot of indigiqueer students. So we've got some community there, but it becomes, usually I'm the one sort of providing support and whatnot. I also have a tremendous queer community back in Ontario with the Métis Nation of Ontario Two-Spirit Council. That is some incredible people, and I've had the opportunity to go back a few times and be with them and to be with that group. So we've got some stuff online. We've also talked about intersections, queer, veteran, Indigenous people. And we found a community of us out there. So we keep getting people saying, we're looking for a queer veteran or we're looking for an Indigenous veteran. And so now we've actually got a small group of queer Indigenous veterans who are out there. And we're making some waves that we're out there making sure that our voices are heard. Because the other piece that happens is as we're seeing a lot of the prides around the country take some strong positions around policing and pride and uniforms and military and pride, it erases us. That we cannot be proud of the fact that we served, that we have to hide our identity again as veterans, which is something that we continue to struggle with. So it's very difficult. So I'm very proud that I'm actually going to be marching with HMCS Brunswicker on Saturday, even though it's going to be pouring rain, I'm sorry to tell you. but proud to have that. And it's important for us to ensure that we do participate where there is being space made for us. We're also, just quickly, in August of this year, we've got 100 people coming to Fredericton, queer veterans from around the country who are coming to an event sponsored by Veteran Affairs Canada for a 2-day forum to address some of the issues that are being faced by queer veterans. This is kind of new for Veteran Affairs, and we're pushing them. They're really moving along with it, but so incredibly proud to be able to say that we've got some allies within government. And now our challenge in New Brunswick is to ensure that we have allies in government here. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Yes, Norman. So navigating queerness in 2024 and also navigating all of the intersectionalities that you have that come with that and existing in these spaces.
So navigating is something that I'm currently doing. When I went to work for Dr. Dornan, he decided he was going to run for MLA. For the Liberal Party for Portland Simons. So he appointed me as his campaign manager on top of everything else. So I am now currently knocking on doors. Yes, I am currently knocking on doors talking to people about what their issues are. And I go like this. I'm exactly who I am, you know, and people know me. I'm well known in the city, and I'm asking them what their issues are and what would they like to see changed. And I'm hearing from so many people, and I can tell you, Policy 713 is not their issue. Their issue is not one bit about Policy 713. Their issues are bigger, bigger, and feel that our government should be placing that energy on the bigger issues, like our homeless, like the cost of living, like all of those things that we struggle with. And many people have said to me, why is Policy 713 even being discussed? It was fine. And I said it's being discussed because certain people within the government want it discussed so they can get votes. And that's really what it's about. I sit at the table now. I sit at the table and have the conversations about the misinformation, about the miscommunication that's out there now. And it's very sad. And I get so frustrated because I'll come in, I'll go into work, and I'll get so frustrated because I'll just have heard an interview from the current Minister of Health. And I'll go in and I'll slam my door, and Dr. Dornan will say to me, okay, what did you hear today? And I said, you need to be the Minister of Health. You need to be the Minister of Health because you know what is happening. You know what is right. You know what the facts are. You are a doctor. People that are talking about this have no clue. And it makes me angry because I'm hearing this information and I'm thinking, that's not what happens when you come into a doctor's office. Those things do not happen. I live and breathe it every day. I know what happens. And those things do not happen. So hopefully in 2024 and beyond, Dr. Dornan is successful with my help, winning his district, but also becoming the new Minister of Health, because he really should be that. And not because he's my employer, but because he knows the healthcare system and understands it. And I think that's the key. You can put people in positions, but if they don't know the system and they don't know how it works, they're going to be of no value to us. I'm excited because there's many things more that I'm going to be doing. Hockey New Brunswick has now given my name to the CHL, and I'm going to Ottawa to present to all of those teams. And I'm going to be starting in November. Now, am I scared? Absolutely. Like, I am scared shitless that I'm going to have to present to that level of player. But guess what? It needs to be done. It needs to be done, and I will do it. And I will represent St. John in a way that it needs to be represented. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? And if you do you feel comfortable yelling them because I do not have a long enough cord? Or would you like to come here?
No, I've got a loud voice. I just want to say we have 194 weeks in, and we have 10 to go. October 21st, 10 weeks. So roll up your sleeves and get going on your third-party options. 100%. 100%. And I would say this, even to add to that, if in fact you've never voted, now is the time, because I can tell you, if you're sitting in this room, you will have a stake, and you will have things taken away from you or people you love if that same government gets in. I can tell you that. I know the people that are being picked on the conservative side that our current premier wants there because of their Christian beliefs and have zero tolerance for me and for who I love. So remember that. And if you've never, ever wanted to, because listen, I've never been involved in politics. I am now, because I have a stake in the game.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm trying to see with the light. No other questions? Amazing. Well, perfect, because I ran over time anyway because I had too many questions. So unless Meredith wants to say any more words, you're done. You're great. Okay, thank you all so much. You were all so vulnerable. You've had so many wonderful things to say. It's an honor sitting next to all of you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Hillary.